Good afternoon, everyone. Let me check my sound's going in. Yes, it is. I think we have got a good feed here. Wonderful. Hello, I'm James. Nice to see you. Thank you very much for taking part in this session, especially if you're here live. You guys deserve an extra biscuit. Don't know where that came from, just for being part of it. Obviously, you might be watching this on demand afterwards. Well, we are here live, as those of us that are, and I don't even know what day it is. I think it's a Thursday. I think it might be the 2nd of May, and it's 3 o'clock. Okay, Marta, everything good?
Yes, it just takes a while.
Oh, okay.
It took a long time to get started, so
Okay, no problem. Anyway, so here we are. A couple of things about this session. First of all, let me introduce Marta to you. You just heard her in the background there. We're slightly worried about the stream. Marta is here to answer questions, receive questions. If you're on the hub page, you can ask us questions. You could drop us a line. You could ask us to give you a shout out. Still don't know why anyone would want one of them off me, but anyway, there you go. We really appreciate it if you're teachers with students in classrooms, guys. We love it when you share something with us on social so we can see that and let people know what we're doing and those sorts of things, and that'd be brilliant. Next, folks, I really would recommend that you take this session with your notes pages available to you, whether you're doing that digitally with the Apple Pen or whatever, or whether you're writing on paper. You really should have those notes pages in front of you. The session is designed that way. Now, we've also got the National Mock Exam, the National Mock Exam Mark Scheme and Model Answers. They're wonderful resources for you to really get in. I'll reiterate that point in a second. Can I also stress as well, there's the exam infographics that really give you some insight into the nitty-gritty of what your exam is going to require of you, and we recommend you becoming super familiar with that. Now, thirdly, we would like a favour from you, please. In return for this remarkable, brilliant free revision and all that, what we'd really appreciate you guys doing is just hitting like on the YouTube stream, and also if you're able to offer us a subscription onto the subscription is free, by the way, on the YouTube channel. I'm not talking about anything else. Hit subscribe to that YouTube channel, completely free, no commitment whatsoever. It really helps us to keep this stuff free long term. So if you like this and it's valuable to you and it moves us forward as a sector, we'd really value you doing that. I think we went over 14,000 subscribers either yesterday or today, or we're there or thereabouts. We're trying to get to 15,000 by the end of the revision period. So get yourself on there, get subscribed to the channel, and that really helps us at our end. Finally, folks, I'm going to be when I go to the canvas in a second, I'm going to switch in microphones. So you might just find you need to adjust your volume as we go from one microphone to the other. So just be aware of that. Otherwise, all the tech should work nicely. If for some reason we lose connection, stay on the stream. If our Wi-Fi goes down, what are you going to do? We'll just get back onto it as soon as we possibly can. So just hang in there. This is our 10th session and we haven't had any issues so far. So all being well, that will be the case today too. Dangerous words. Now then, we've got a lot of content. We're going to do 10 topics in this afternoon session, and we're going to cover skills as well. We're going to do some writing, we're going to do some marking, we're going to do some keyword work, we're going to do some command term work. So there really is a lot to do. So I'll stop droning on at this point. We're going to split the session into two halves. They may be slightly more weighted towards the first half in terms of time, but we're going to get a bunch of the material done and out of the way, and then we'll stop. We'll have a little break, a little chit chat, a bit of Q&A, and then we'll get the second bit out. We will definitely, no matter what happens, be finished at 4:30 UK time. That is an hour and 27 minutes from now. So no matter what happens, we will be done in that time. If you're waiting for lifts or whatever, we will make sure we get you out in time. Marta, anything I might have forgotten?
I was going to say, did you mention the chat functionality?
I did mention it, okay, but we'll mention it again.
I may not have been listening.
Cheers. You can contact us on the chat. Send us a message. Marta will pick that up, and if it's either she will answer it or she'll bring it to me to answer on screen, whatever works best.
The bottom right-hand corner.
The bottom right-hand corner of the hub page. Brilliant. Okay, not sure why I went a bit Welsh there, but we'll carry on. Let's switch over, get over to the Canvas feed. This is the nerve-wracking moment for me. Hopefully this will go well. Digital pen in hand. Brace yourselves. Perfect time as I start the stream. My phone tingles away in the background. Apologies for that. Okay, we're here for obviously Unit 1 Anatomy Physiology BTEC Support Level 3. Now, a couple of things I want to stress to you. First of all, you really need to have the notes pages with you when you're taking this session. The notes pages, highlighted there, the notes pages are available in the description of the video by going to the hub page and downloading. They're completely free. Go get them, print them off, put them onto your OneNote, onto your whatever, PDF, editor, whatever, and get those in your life. This session is far better when you follow along with those notes, okay? It's important that you do that. Secondly, folks, I've also published Exam Infographics, which is the breakdown of the trends in the exam year on year on year. Therefore, you can get some of sort of the key the tendencies of what this exam requires of you in terms of both content and skill and command terms and this sort of thing. We've also published a national mock exam paper, a national mock exam mark scheme to go with that, and model answers. Guys, I don't know how better to say this, but please learn them. Okay, get stuck into that exam, have a go at it, mark it, learn the terms in the mark scheme, get in the model answers and mark that as well, and have a look at those model answers in terms of why they're effective. Go and look and effectively learn those answers. I know it's tedious, I know it's not the most exciting thing, I know it ain't Netflix, but nevertheless, that is going to have an impact on your exam performance, and if you care enough about it, you will make that opportunity happen, because it really, really does make a difference to your performance, so we encourage you to do that. I said to someone in an equivalent session yesterday, I said, if I was your teacher in the room with you and you hadn't done that, I'd be giving you one of them glances. You know what I mean? It's ultimately up to you, but I'd be like, come on, meet me halfway here, son. You know, that would be that kind of thing. Anyway, this is what we're going to cover in this session. Okay, we're going to do all 10 of these topics in something under an hour and a half. And I'm going to try and give you as much detail as I humanly can about all of these processes. Notice this is not whole course, all right? The topics that we have selected are well represented in the national mock exam and the model answers, therefore. But we are providing a selection of material from the course. Of course, you need to study all. And finally, guys, notice that we're going to be looking at skill development. It's going to be a really important part of this session. It's not just about content as such, it's also about skill development as we progress through. So with all that understood, let's get stuck into this. I'm actually going to increase the scale of this slightly so I've got a little bit more space because my pen end is a little bit thick. So what we'll do here is we're going to look at joints first. So we've got three classifications of joints. We've got our synovial, we're going to focus on them. We've got our fibrous or fixed joints. We're talking about things such as the sacrum to the coccyx joints. We're talking about joints, for example, the joint between the tibia and fibula, for example. We've got cartilaginous joints. Think about the vertebrae, for example. So some movement, slightly movable in there. But we're interested in synovial joints. What do we have? Well, we have hinge joints. Examples. We have got knee. We have got elbow. We have got ankle. Those are our classic, that's an A, those are our classic examples of those joints. Furthermore, if we go along, we also have ball and socket joints. That's not dark enough. Look at this one. No, there's that really. Ball and socket. Think about shoulder. Think about hip. Shoulder, hip. Fantastic. We've also got other joints though. We're also thinking about the pivot joint. Okay, pivot was really considered to be two different joints, two primary joints in the body, pivot joints. We've got the neck, which is a pivot, but also you've got your radio-ulnar joint, That's the joint between your radius and your ulnar in your forearm and allows you to turn your hand up and down. That is a pivot joint in there, believe it or not. Furthermore, we've also got saddle joints. There are not very many of them, but we've got a saddle joint at the base of our thumb, for example. We've also got gliding joints. These are common where we have like what we call process bones or irregular bones, and examples of this would be in the wrist. Okay, so we've got gliding joints in the wrist. And then finally over here, folks, we've got condyloid joints. And condyloid joints, the best ones we can probably give you as an example are fingers. Now, the point to mention here is all of those are synovial joints, all different kinds. And we're going to have a look at a general synovial joint here and the features of that joint. What are those features? Well, first things first, let's have a look at I'll go in a sort of a slightly unusual order. I'm going to look at ligaments first of all. Ligaments, first of all, they cross from bone to bone. So they cross the joint, it's a nice way of saying it, and their role is stability. Okay, they prevent unwanted movement. Specifically, they prevent dislocation. That is the job of a ligament. Notice a ligament has no direct relationship with muscle, for example. If we'd have been talking about tendon here, of course, we'd be talking about tendon connecting muscle to bone. No, this is connecting a bone to a bone, but there's no force transmission. It's a stabilizing process that's going on there. Now, let's take this a little bit further. I want to have a look at the synovial or the joint capsule down here. Now, we'll come down to this box here and we'll do this one next. The key things about the synovial capsule is that they surround the joint. Secondly, even though this is a synovial joint, not a fibrous joint, their makeup is quite fibrous, quite tough. And the descriptions we want to give here are that it protects, and it encloses the joint. That is what a synovial capsule actually does. Now, of course, on the inside of that synovial capsule, we have a synovial membrane, which I'm going to cover next, bottom right. And the job of the synovial membrane, the inner lining of the synovial capsule, its job is to secrete synovial fluid. And of course that's important because, as we're going to see now, that synovial fluid goes on as the lubricating force of this particular structure. So let's get ourselves up to here, and let's sort of have a look at what we've got in terms of synovial fluid. We have got the idea that synovial fluid lubricates joints and it reduces friction. Okay, so that fluid, we've got to remember this thing's moving all the time. Like if you've got one of those flip phones, I have actually got one of them, or you've got one of those Z Folds or whatever they're called. I know there's loads of alternatives, but you've got one of them. That hinge joint is gonna, you can probably feel it if you're bending straight. It sort of gets a bit of wear and tear, doesn't it? Well, that's the job of the synovial fluid, to make sure that is a smooth, consistent movement each time. And one thing just to mention about synovial fluid, nice term to become familiar with, is viscosity. Now, generally speaking, with joint synovial fluid viscosity, you want it to be lower. Okay, you want it to be less sticky, less thick, more lubricating, thick enough to be gel-like, but not so sort of soft. So think about things like temperature. Higher temperature decreases synovial fluid viscosity. Movement decreases synovial fluid viscosity because it heats it up, in essence. So that's a nice way to think about that particular point. Now, we've got two structures left. I want to talk about cartilage first. Cartilage is an amazing structure, no blood supply whatsoever, but what it does is it covers ends of bones, and we can see that in the image here. This is this kind of grey tissue here and this grey tissue here, so it covers the ends of bones. What does it do is it prevents impact. It prevents bone to bone impact, and we often refer to it as the shock absorber of the joint, the shock absorber. So it prevents those joints hitting on the end of each other, and that's what would happen if we, for example, developed a meniscus or cartilage injury, or if we experienced something like arthritis. That is when that cartilage layer is less. It's often the cause of something like a hip or a knee replacement because that cartilage is shot. So that's what that will be done. And lots of sports will cause damage to cartilage, lots of dynamic sports, lots of repetitive sports. And finally, we've got our bursae. Now, what are these? These sit near tendons, usually between the tendon and the joint, but they sit near tendons, and what they do is they reduce friction. So, of course, one of the dangers with this sort of often bending or movement of the joint is it will rub on the soft tissue of, let's say, a tendon and cause tendinitis or epicondylitis. And the job of the bursae is to prevent that from happening, is to cause sort of a gap between the movement of the joint and the tendon itself, so that no damage is done, or no rubbing and damage is done in there. Now, what we're going to do in this next section, let's move things on. We're going to have a look at the role of some of the joints we've talked about in relation to three movements. A, we've got the upwards phase of a bicep curl. B, the kicking of the ball. Now, obviously, it depends whether you do the preparation or the execution of this. And we've got the cartwheel. So as an example, if we were to look at movement A, which is the upwards of a bicep curl, we've got the elbow, which is a hinge joint. We've got the radius, the ulna, and the humerus that are articulating. And of course, what's happening is in the upward phase, it's flexion. And in the downward phase, it's also capable of extension, but during the execution phase of a chest pass netball. So what's happening here is that what would be taking place here is that the extension would be as we pass out the ball from our chest, for example. So that is what the elbow is capable of. Let's think about the knee. Well, the knee is a hinge joint. We've already said that. Secondly, its articulating bones are the tibia and femur. Okay, so we've got the tibia and femur. And what's this capable of? It's capable again of flexion and extension. So let's give a couple of examples of when that might happen. Well, flexion is going to be the kick preparation for B. Okay, so effectively bending this leg back in that direction. But of course, when the knee is going to extend, it's going to be the execution of that kick. Okay, so as this person kicks through and the leg straightens here, that strike there is going to be an extension of the knee, and of course that's happening at that hinge joint that we've referred to already. Okay, let's take things further. The hip, it's a ball and socket joint, fantastic. Let's have a look at this. Pelvis and femur are articulating bones capable of flexion, extension. For example, flexion in the downward phase of a squat. So if we go down in a downward phase of squat, the leg will go in front of us. Picture a person kind of like this, okay? Now that's not a brilliant example of a squat, but notice that from here, the hip is forward. That is flexion. It's extension when it goes, what a drawing. It's extension when it goes to that sort of behind the body position. Now, with abduction, adduction, let's think about this with the hip. If we think about abduction, we could be thinking about something like the cartwheel, okay? But we've been asked here to relate this to performance B. So here, are we arguing the leg has come slightly out here in order to sort of do that sort of more rounder kick, almost like a volley type kick? Maybe. That's what we're talking about there. Adduction obviously is bringing that hip joint back to the midline of the body. We've also got horizontal adduction and abduction for performance C. And of course, that's where we're seeing the actual sort of star shape here in that cartwheel. And hyperextension. I mean, hyperextension, think about a performance like an arabesque. An arabesque, a gymnastics movement generally, a dance movement sometimes. The arabesque is where we sort of stand on one leg, lower off our upper body, and then stretch our leg, our raised leg backwards in a horizontal way behind us. Okay, let's move on to the shoulder. What do we have here? Shoulder, we of course know it's a ball and socket, fantastic. We know that the articulating bones are the humerus and the scapula, wonderful. And what movements have we got? Well, it's basically all of these same movements down here, okay? So, for example, if we look at the movements that we've got, let's have a look at some shoulder movements. Let's see if we can identify them. Okay, this is fairly neutral. The shoulders here are quite neutral here. But what we've got here is we've got abduction, abduction here. We've got abduction, abduction, abduction. Now, obviously, as this person strikes the ball, they're going to bring those arms back in an adducted fashion. But obviously, that's what we've got in this particular case. Okay, let's think about the wrist. Just let me draw it down. With the wrist, I just want to be clear here. I am going to claim that the wrist is a gliding joint, which, by the way, it is. But just bear in mind what I said before. The radial ulnar joint is actually a pivot. I just want to remind you of that because it can actually rotate in that sense. But the gliding joint of the wrist, what that allows us to do, to be clear, guys, this is the joint between the radius, the ulnar, and the carpals. But the type of movement we can do here is flexion and extension. Flexion, extension. So I just want to look at an example. If we look at performance C above, I want to look at the wrist position. Okay, now I've drawn all over it, unfortunately. In fact, I wonder if I can just turn my drawing. There we go. You see how this wrist now, if I just go above, this wrist now is effectively bent back. That is an extended position. The opposite of that would be flexed. Let me put my drawings back over there. The opposite of that would be flexed in that way. Now, finally, let's think about the ankle. With the ankle, we have got the type of bone, of course, is a hinge. We mentioned that earlier on. The articulating bones are the tibia, fibula, and I'm going to say the tarsals. I mean, normally I would specifically mention the talus as the primary bone that articulates. Now, in terms of movement, we've got flexion and extension again from above, but this time we call them plantar flexion, which is when we point the toes, and dorsiflexion, which is when we raise the toes towards the shin. Okay, now again, if we go back to our performance, do we have any examples of plantar flexion and dorsiflexion? Well, I would say definitely plantar flexion for our pointed toes for our gymnast. I would certainly say that this is dorsiflexed here, the toe raised to the ground, and that this here is plantar flexed in that particular moment and remains so during the strike. So it's a nice way to think about those movement patterns. So let's mark an answer. Let's have a look at this answer here. Our question asks us, look close at the image, fine. Explain how movements at the knee and ankle allow the player to take a successful throw. So let's just have a look at it first of all. Generally speaking, the knee is going from a flex position to here, an extended position, right? It's going from a flex to extended. Now, my ankle position, it's going from a dorsiflex position here to a plantar flex position here, or more plantar flex. So that is the sort of the model we're talking about. During the preparation phase here, dorsiflexion occurs. Good, mark. At the ankle joint due to the tibialis anterior, we've got the muscle contraction there, the stable position. As the player executes the drop, then we've got plantar flexion occurs. Now, I'm going to suggest that is now a submax. Okay, that is now a submax. That submax is the case because I've now got 2 marks for my ankle. So I'm now looking, even if I get something correct from the ankle, I'm looking for the 3rd mark to come from the knee. with the gastrocnemius contracted as the player comes up and the toes again for maximum height. Also, during the execution, there is execution at the knee joint from the quadricep contracting, which allows the player to straighten their legs and take the shot, creating power in the legs. Now, the reason I'm going to say this is vague and gets no mark. Why am I going to do that? Why am I not accepting this? Because I wanted the word extension of the knee. So our model answer, and by the way, these are real students doing these answers, that answer there doesn't get the job done for me because it doesn't use the term of extension, and I want that term to be able to award the mark. Now, whether the mark scheme allows us, for example, the quadriceps is the controlling muscle, I'm going to mark it in that way. Obviously, check the mark scheme. I don't have the mark scheme in front of me, but I'm going to mark it in that way, and I'm going to say that we needed that specific terminology to pick up that mark. Straightening ain't good enough for us. Okay, let's just keep it going. I want to talk to you here about movement of antagonistic muscle pairs. So first of all, guys, just a bit of intuition. Muscles can only pull. They don't do anything else, and they can only pull in one direction, nothing to do with the band. So they can only pull in one direction. That is their job. So for that reason, because the joints have to be able to move in multiple directions, we have to have muscles working in pairs at any joint. That is the nature of a muscle pair. So what do we have? We have an agonist. The agonist is the prime mover, and it contracts to cause movement, okay? But it also contracts to control movement. That's what we call an eccentric contraction, okay? Now, can I stress to you, I have circled the word contracts twice and written it out a third time. The agonist always contracts. Now, let me take it further. The antagonist, which is the pair of the agonist, it always relaxes to allow movement to occur, and it is passive. The agonist relaxes. If the muscle is not relaxing, it is not the agonist. It is, in fact, the contracting one, the prime mover, the agonist. It's really important to get that message across, and we'll look at some examples. Now, a synergist is a muscle that assists the primary mover. It gives a little bit of assistance. It's not the main contracting muscle, but it contracts to help that muscle out a bit, and it's important for accuracy and fluidity of movement. So think about sort of ideas of precision and technique here. The synergist makes sure that our technique is nice and controlled and goes in the right way. Let's say we're doing some weightlifting of some kind. Now, the fixator is the stabilizing muscle, and very often it's above the joint, and we'll see that in a few moments' time. Okay, let's move that forward. So let's have a look here. What do we have? Now, it very much depends on what joint we're looking at, but what I'm going to do here is I'm going to decide we're talking about the elbow. Do this for the ankle, do this for the knee, do this for the wrist, keep doing it. What is the pair of muscles operating at the elbow? Well, we have the tricep brachii and we have the bicep brachii as our pair for A. What is the joint movement? Well, here we've got flexion, and here to say throughout the movement is showing extension. And what would be the agonist muscle? Now, when we generally speaking contract with when we cause elbow extension, it's typically the tricep which is the active muscle. Now, that is not the case if we are slowing something down, catching something, receiving something. That would become the agonist there. Anyway, doesn't matter. I'll ignore what I just said, that it wasn't true. But what we're going to say here is that we have now got a concentric contraction of this tricep muscle, and that tricep muscle is pulling on the ulna and it is causing extension of the elbow. Confused myself a minute ago. So the tricep is the agonist, which of course would make the bicep the antagonist, and so on. Okay, what have we got here? We've got, back to our three core movements, we've got supporting action A, B, C. So let's just have a little look here. We've got the idea that the elbow is a hinge joint. It's moving through flexion. It's the bicep brachii causing it. It's the tricep brachii, which is the antagonist. What could be a synergist in this situation? Okay. Now, actually, it's a muscle which is not named on our course that I'm going to give you, but I'm going to tell you this is correct. We have a muscle called the brachialis that would be the synergist, and the rhomboid major would be the fixator. Now, it's a little bit frustrating that we are going to be mentioning muscles here that are not directly named specification, but these are the synergists and fixators to these movements. Now, when we think about the ankle hinge joint and we're going into plantar flexion, we've got the gastrocnemius, which is the agonist, and we've got the tibialis anterior, the antagonist. So what supports the gastrocnemius? Well, we've got a muscle called the soleus, which sits underneath the gastrocnemius and will support. And the fixator, I'm going to use one of the four quadricep muscles, the rectus femoris. Okay, so that is going to be our fixator above the joint. Now, we could obviously go on to point C and look at any of those joints in there, but I'm going to go for knee. And of course, the knee is the hinge joint. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say the movement is extension. It's extended in that situation. Therefore, the agonist is going to be the quadricep group. Please write those out. Quadricep, at least write quadricep. Rectus femoris, vastus lateralis, vastus intermedius, and vastus medialis. The antagonist is going to be the hamstring group, so I'll just put hamstrings, but you guys obviously you can put in bicep femoris, semimembrane, and semitendinosus. Fantastic, there's the hamstring group. Now the fixator, this would be our hip flexors above. You can name them if you want. You can say iliopsoas or iliacus and psoas, but we've got the hip flexors acting as a fixator. Now the way to think about the synergist is, this is where this term has sort of tripped us up. If here I had said rectus femoris, here I would be able to say vastus lateralis, which is another one of those quadricep muscles. So it gives me the opportunity to use my sort of range of muscular knowledge in that particular environment, because I've got more than one muscle, which is obviously in this case the four quadriceps. Okay, I think I'm at the end of the canvas. I am. Canvas change there. Can you spot the error on the page? Of course it was obvious. This is wrong. This should say fast glycolytic. Apologies for that. I noticed that we used the same image for something else yesterday. I noticed it then. I should have changed it. Apologies. That's just a little clarification. Did it on purpose. You should have noticed. Anyway, I've got this image here because we tend to present to students that there are 3 types of muscle fiber types. That is absolutely not true. There are 3 categories of muscle fiber types. Any muscle fiber that falls into that profile we would call a slow oxidative. But of course, it could easily kind of be here and then here and then here and then here and then here, right? So it could be that. Where would we put that? We'd probably put it in here, wouldn't we, right? So I just want to, this is a spectrum or a continuum of identification. Now, what we're going to do is within that understanding, we're going to just make sure that we understand the functional characteristics of these fiber types. So type 1, slow twitch, slow oxidative. You've got all of the descriptors, the structural characteristics, but what I want to do here is I want to say the following. These have, and I've done them in red on purpose, they have very high aerobic potential. Fantastic, this is aerobic. But the trade-off is they have low anaerobic potential. I should be writing smaller, anaerobic. They have low force production. They have low speed of contraction. But they are really good at recovery, so they recover extremely rapidly if they need any recovery at all. And also, they have very, very good fatigue resistance. So it's a really nice way to think about these fibers, that we've gone from them being red in color, lots of mitochondria, site of aerobic respiration, myoglobin to move oxygen within the cell, capillary density for great rate of diffusion, etc. But this is what it can actually do. Now, if I go into a pinky color, which I'm doing deliberately, and I look at the functional characteristics of a 2X, a fast twitch fiber, it's saying it's a large muscle fiber, absolutely, but what we're going to say is it's got low, that was meant to be pinker. Let me get something that's pinkier. Don't think that's actually a word. It's not really worked this. So we have got low anaerobic, let me do that better. Always helps if you get your statements right in this type of scenario. They have got low aerobic capacity, but they have got high anaerobic capacity. Now I'm going to get to a bit of intuition here for a second, but what these can do is they can do large force contractions. They can also do high speed of contraction. Those points obviously are connected, but they're generally, in relative terms, they're quite slow to recover. Okay, so their recovery is a bit slower, and they have very, very low fatigue resistance. So they're going to fatigue pretty rapidly. Now, I could now go into this middle column and say, well, everything here is intermediate, but I'll let you kind of just figure that out. Intermediate aerobic, intermediate anaerobic, intermediate force production, intermediate speed. I won't sort of bore you with that with those 2 A's. You can do that, but the point I really want to make is I just want to get a bit of intuition to you. Let me draw a muscle for you. Now, I don't know if you're going to follow along with my drawing. This will take me literally a few seconds, but there's a muscle. Who knows what muscle it is? There it is. It's kind of stripy and whatever, and I've cut that muscle here. So let's imagine this is a bicep or whatever, and the thing I want you to notice is we've got this area here. Okay, that area there. Now, if I was to turn that towards you, that would be the cross-section of that area. And if I was to say, look, the pink units are fast twitch units, so I'm going to do it like this, and the red units, I mean, maybe I should have done a more distinguishing colour, but the red units, these red units are our slow twitch bundles. Okay, so in this one, for example, you'll see most of this muscle is made up with slow twitch groups of muscle fibres. And the point I want to make is this. If this here is made up of lots and lots of groups of muscles, the point I want to make is if we bring one of these groups out like this, and then that has individual fibres within it, every single one of these fibres is going to be the same. So for example, this group here is a group of those fibres there, okay? Whereas this group here is a group of those fibres there. And of course we'd have the intermediate, what I've done as brown ones as well. And it's really important that, because the way a muscle works is when you do a muscle contraction, perhaps this one, I'll do a different colour, perhaps this one, this one, this one, and this one are switched on. That's going to be quite a forceful contraction. Now I'm not going to get into spatial summation, but also it can rest some of those units while the others work. I'm not going to get into that, but that's why they're built into bundles, and that's the intuition of this subject. And often we don't teach that in PE, so I just want to get that across to you. So I'm not going to fill that one out. It's you guys have got all the information that I really want you to have there. But what I am going to do, just go in a little bit here. I just want to look at an application of this. So we've got 4 performers. We've got Sandra, Milo, Jan, Clinton. Okay, so let's be Sandra first of all. Sandra has got some bunch of type 2A fibres that are her predominant, and she's got a bit of a contribution of others. I feel like Sandra is going to be something like an 800 metre runner. Okay, she's good at sort of muscular endurance because of these, because she has got very high 2A groups. Lots of groups, I won't give them their technical name, got lots of groups of 2A fibres. But also note she's still got some power groups, she's still got some more aerobic groups, she's got things that can contribute to that performance. What wouldn't she be good at? I wouldn't recommend marathon to this person. Why? Because she's got low SO or type 1 fibres. Let's move forward. What have we got for Milo, one of the tweeners, as I seem to remember from my younger child parenting days? Hey, it's tweenies. Anyway, what have we got here? We have got lots, very high proportion of fast twitch 2Xs. So this person, I was going to put 100 metre sprinter, but let me choose something different. I'm going to say this person is a putter, a shot putter. Okay, so they've got lots of fast twitch fibres. Why? The justification, lots of 2X, very, very explosive, powerful type performer. What wouldn't? Well, they really wouldn't be suited to marathon. They'd have a shocker. And that's because they have got exceptionally low SO. Look at this. I mean, that is, they basically don't have any. Well, they do, but you know what I mean. Now, let's take a bit further. Let's look at Jan. Absolute legend, this fella, by the way. What's he really suited to? He's more of an aerobic performer, isn't he? So let's make him a triathlete. Okay, so he's my triathlete for argument's sake. Why? Because he's got lots and lots of SO fibres. Brilliant. What wouldn't he be good at? Well, he would be good at the marathon if he took it up. What he wouldn't be good at is, let's go for sprinting. He's not going to be the quickest in a straight line over 100 metres. Why? Because he's got low 2X. Okay, he's got low 2X fibres. And you get the idea. Lastly here, we'll just go with Clinton. Clinton's a bit more balanced. I'm seeing a games player here, and I'm going to go for a tennis player. I think this kind of good percentage of this and this allows him, he's still hitting the ball hard, but he's got good muscular endurance, got decent aerobic capacity. So tennis player I'm going for. Why? Because he's got high 2A, but he's also got balance across the 3 types. So he's sort of like a games player type. Maybe we're all a bit like this. But what's he not going to be very good at? Well, he's not the most powerful, so I'm going to go for javelin. So he's probably not going to lob a javelin that far. Why? Because his lowest grouping is the 2X. Clearly note, I'm justifying as I go the reason why I'm choosing those things. Okay, let's keep going. We've got response to the muscular system to a single exercise session. So obviously what we're looking at here is we're looking at what happens when we exercise. And I'm just going to mark this answer to begin with. And it's the muscular system, notice. So we're going to get the muscles will receive an increased blood supply. So there's my 1 mark. There's that one. That's going to get me 1. And I've got an increase in muscle pliability, and I'm going to get 1, and I'm going to get a max like this. Now, can I stress, these are meant to be little ticks, I just do them sort of quick hand there. Now, can I just stress something to you? This one, which is muscle pliability, why does the muscle pliability go up? It goes up because the muscle is warmer. It is receiving warmer blood, it's warmer in itself, it's releasing energy through aerobic and perhaps anaerobic respiration. It increases in warmth. So let's move this on, guys. What have we got here? We have got description and explanation to the response. So we get an increased blood supply to the muscle to deliver more oxygen. Let's explain that. Muscle receives sufficient oxygen so the performer can continue to exercise and perform for longer. Remove more CO2 from the muscle. Now, the thing I always want to get to with this is I want to say they can do higher intensity aerobically. Now, if you were suddenly to start running now with no warm-up, with no sort of build-up, you would do the vast majority of that work, and even if it was a jog, anaerobically. But by the fact we do something like a warm-up, get our system going, we're able to fire up effectively our cardiovascular respiratory systems and metabolic systems, and we're able to do higher intensity work aerobically. Now, this one's an interesting one. I mentioned it above. More increased temperature during exercise. Why is this good? Well, the first point is that's an arrow up, by the way. We get an up arrow. We get increased should do my subscript really. Oxygen dissociation. In warmer temperatures, oxygen all molecules bounce about a bit more, kinetic theory, and therefore they dissociate more readily from hemoglobin and pass into the muscle. Great. What does that mean? Higher intensity aerobically. But it's not just that. We mentioned above increased muscle pliability. Increased muscle pliability. Fantastic. Let's move on. We've got an explanation here. Muscles can stretch further, reduce risk of injury. Well, guess what we've got? Increased pliability. We've already touched on that point. By the way, another word you can use in here if you want to is extensibility. It's a really nice term for you to use. The muscle is actually able to extend through a greater distance. It actually will lengthen. It's actually warm enough to lengthen. We can even, if we got technical about it, we could say it even has a delayed stretch reflex, but I won't get into that here. Now, what happens if we get an increased speed and strength of contraction? Well, first of all, muscles apply up arrow more force. That's obvious because we've got an increased strength of contractions. But this is what I think is interesting. We get up arrow power through, and I really like this statement here, greater ROM. Now you might be thinking, what is ROM? It's not that. I'm not going to make a Rommel joke. I'm not going to do it. It's not funny. Anyway, increased power through greater ROM. So let's say that through, I don't know, golf swing, the power can be applied through a longer strike phase. It can be powered through and we can get a wider range of motion with power being applied. Okay, here, leads to muscle fatigue during a high intensity exercise, only able to sustain intensity for short periods, need to allow recovery. Well, what is this? This is the production of lactic acid. And what, of course, lactic acid will lead to is OBLA, onset of blood lactate accumulation. That actually happens at a specific level of blood lactate, but that's useful. We also get micro tears in muscles. What impact does this have? Well, it increases blood flow post-exercise. So one thing that will happen is if we've got micro tears of muscles, blood flow will still be fired to those areas, and that will be done for repair. And one of the interesting things about repair is we tend to repair stronger. Now, there's a whole theory here called hyperplasia. I'm not going to get into it for you, but nevertheless, that's going to be useful for us. Now, if you see here, guys, I just want to stress to you the distinction between a describe and an explain. So we had up here that we described increased blood supply, increased muscle pliability. So now I'm going to imagine that those are our two. So we've got increased blood supply, and the other sort of stimulus I've got is increased, what did I have, pliability. My explanation needs to be, what is the impact of this? I need to take that further, go, okay, to get my mark, I need to explain the impact. And I'm going to say, perform at higher intensity aerobically, or delay OBLA, or something like that. That's fantastic. So there's that one. Now my increased pliability, I need to take it further and give an explanation. What's the impact of this? And I'm going to say up arrow, greater application of force through a wider range of motion. Get those explanations in your life, folks. That is where we get those extra marks from. We don't just state the factor, we take it further and we explain the impact. Am I going to do one more section or not? What have we got here? Yeah, I'm going to go for it, guys. I'm going to go for it. I want to get this section in and done with you guys. Okay, so let's have a look at this. What have we got? We've got lung volumes. We are saying minute ventilation equals tidal volume times breathing rate. Can I just give you a couple of units just super quick, so I find students get these wrong all the time. Minute ventilation is litres per minute. Fantastic. Tidal volume, you can also do it in litres if you want, but I'm actually going to suggest to you that you do it in millilitres. I find it better to do that in millilitres personally. It tends to be in 500 or so at rest. And breathing rate, what have we got here? We've got BPM, but notice the B is breaths per minute. And by the way, just one thing, we can one thing you might just want to look out for with breathing rate, its symbol is F for frequency. Just be aware of that, because sometimes we see that it might be more to do when you're googling things and watching videos and whatever you're trying to do your studying, but that's something to bear in mind. So let's have a look at this. Tidal volume, what is it? It's the amount of air inspired and expired per breath. Fine, it makes up it's a per breath figure, so there's my tidal volume, however much that was, 500 mil, something like that. What happens if we do exercise? Well, if we do exercise, we are going to breathe more deeply. And we are going to breathe more deeply. And that's the point I want to get across. Tidal volume increases. Now, it happens to increase because we decrease other values. They're called inspiratory and expiratory reserve, but that doesn't matter. Residual volume. What is it, first of all? It is the max... Sorry, what am I talking about? It is the volume of air... is the volume of air left in the lung, that is, after max exhalation. So when we do a don't know why I made that noise, but when we do that maximum exhalation, there's still air left in the lung that prevents the alveoli collapsing in on themselves. It's actually a safety restriction method. Imagine crushing your lungs literally down to nothing. That would, I don't want to bring up horrible things. That would happen at sort of very high pressure situations, bottom of the ocean, that kind of thing. That's reminding me of that thing with the Titanic. Anyway, let's not go there. So now we're being told it remains the same here. That will get you a mark. But in reality, there is a slight decrease in residual volume during maximal exhalation. And that's, I'm not going to get into control, but that's because we've got the expiratory muscles kicking in. Now, vital capacity, what is it? It's the max volume. This is what I started reading out earlier. Max volume inhaled and exhaled. So that would be, so by the way, if you take your tidal volume up to its maximum level, you actually achieve vital capacity. That's what we mean by that. What happens during exercise? Well, vital capacity is your maximum. So of course, during this, it remains the same. So it's the same because your maximum vital capacity is your maximum vital capacity. That's what it is. Minute ventilation. It is the amount of air per minute breathed in and out, so make sure you've got that per minute value there. What happens during exercise? Well, of course, it goes up. Now, this is an important one. When we exercise, breathing depth, tidal volume goes first, and second is frequency or breathing rate, F. So notice this next time you exercise, go on the treadmill, play football, whatever. You will start to breathe more deeply, and only at higher intensities will you breathe faster. That is absolutely the case. Now, I could get into the control of that, might do later on, but for now, that will do. Now, total lung volume, this is the volume after max inhalation. So basically, it is your vital capacity plus, so it's residual volume plus vital capacity. It's those two put together, and this will stay the same. What your maximum values are will be the same. Now let's scroll down to here. We've got some values and we've got a task to do. What have we got here? So first of all, there's an error. I'm going to say somewhere in this table there's an error. I'll give you 3 seconds to see if you can find it. I'm checking if my tea's gone cold. It's flipping freezing. Okay, so what's the error? This should not say per minute. This should not say per minute. Remember what I said before? Tidal volume is per breath. So that's an error, first of all. And it says here, select one of the players from the table above and analyze the change in tidal volume and how this will impact. Now, my command is analyze, and this means that I've got to break down and explain. That's my job, break down and explain. So I'm going to choose, who should I go for? Player C. Let's do player C. So player C, what do we have? And I'm just doing this in shorthand. You will write this obviously into prose, but what have we got here? Well, first of all, I'm analysing, showing the different parts. Well, at rest, what has player C got? Let me just go back up slightly. Player C has got a resting tidal volume of 0.5 litres. Fine. They've got an exercise tidal volume. You're going to write this into prose of 3.1 litres. They have got a difference from rest to exercise of 2.6 litres. Now, what is the impact of that? The fact they take more air into the lung during exercise than at rest. What is the impact of that? Explain what it does. Well, it increases the diffusion rate, so I get more diffusion occurring faster. Okay, that's good. Therefore, what does that mean? It means that I get more oxygenated blood. I could say there, more oxyhemoglobin. What does that mean? It means I can do more aerobic respiration. Okay, I can do more aerobic respiration, aerobic system basically, aerobic respiration. And what does this mean? A statement I've made again and again in this session. I can do more, in fact, ignore that. I can do higher intensity aerobically. And that is why those changes really matter. And can you see there how I'm not just taking the values out of the table, but I'm expressing the impact of those values. And folks, how can I say this? That is what you need to do. I think we're at let's pause there. Woo. Big first half. Smoking pen. Thoughts, Marta, questions, observations?
Yes, one question. Notice that you're trying to stress a lot the impact that things have.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Okay, what I found generally is I've been teaching PE a long time across a range of different courses, including BTEC courses. So what I found generally is students are really good at sort of describing something. Okay, they learn the facts, they describe it, subject knowledge, pretty good. What I've found to be a more scarce skill is to state what the impact of that is on performance, health, whatever it happens to be. So that's why I'm really trying to drill that in. Generally speaking, there are exceptions. If you get a define question, just define it. If you get a describe a process, just describe it. But if you get explaining how, why, analysing, evaluating, you need to talk about the impact of that thing. You need to say what that is causing. And that's the thing I'm really trying to drill home here. And like teachers who are listening to this, if your student, and by the way, look, just take this as a general observation, I'm not, in no way is this meant judgmentally, but if our students are not saying to us, sir, miss, is there any other way of looking at that? What's the exact impact of that? What would it mean if I change value X? You know, these are things that students should be thinking about because they're in that frame, and asking us about because they're in that frame of thinking. I get quite concerned when I tell students a theory, I don't know, like bone growth or something, and they just nod and go, okay. It's like, well, don't you want to challenge me on it? Don't you want to know if there's another way of viewing this? Don't you want to look? No, okay, well, I got the concept. How can that impact me as a performer, as a coach, as a trainer? Like, that's what I want the students to be thinking. That's what I want. I mean, you can sort of summarize it as the and what methodology. Like, it's like, okay, here's a fact, and what's the impact of that thing? And that's what I'm really trying to draw out of students. And you'll see this later on. I'm going to do some energy system stuff, and I really want to sort of we're going to have a look at some analysis and evaluation sort of skills in relation to that. And like, you know, what if you sort of put it down to its basic principle, what's the point of learning an energy system? It's because we're going to be able to apply it to some kind of impact. We're going to have to be able to do something with it, or anything else for that matter. So yeah, so that's why I think impact's really important. And for those teachers who are listening to that, we've got a published model called the EIO model for making examples. It's example, impact, outcome. Making an impact is not as good as making an impact and an outcome of that impact. That's actually better. If you look at the blog, it's all there. Write about that really, really regularly. So that'd be something I encourage you to have a look at. Mm-hmm. Is that right?
Yes. We might have a question. I'm just the person's typing.
I see. Okay.
So I'm
type faster. No.
No, hold on a second. It's not a question, it's a shout out.
Oh.
We've got a shout out from Glenn Bradbury from Northampton School for Boys.
Oh, amazing.
Saying that they're enjoying the session and that they're very valuable.
Cheers,
very
guys.
Valuable going over
and that's Glenn at Northampton.
Glenn Bradbury, Northampton.
My first ever PE teaching job interview was in Northampton. I don't know if the school is still there. I haven't looked for a long time. I won't say the school, so don't know. It's not. It was a school whose name began with a W. I don't know if it's still there. I'll just leave that for you guys to ponder. It may well not be there anymore. It's whatever, 27 years ago or something. No, not that long, 25 years ago. So it might not be there anymore. Yeah, I never got it. Disappointing. I got it on my third job. The 3 interviews it took me.
Yeah. Well, who knows? Maybe you won't be here now.
First one in Northampton, second one in Stockport, third one in Oxfordshire, which is the one I got for my first PE teaching. Yeah. There you go. Anyway, cheers, Glenn. Appreciate the message, Glenn. That's really good of you. We like those little social elements. And
yes.
Super. Okay, we do still have a big chunk, so I'm going to get back to it, as it were. We're going straight into some respiratory control or some control of breathing, guys. And what I'm going to try and do here is really express why you might have noticed during exercise that breathing depth increases first, and only at really heavy exercise does breathing rate increase. So hopefully this is going to be a useful expression of that concept, because I find it really interesting. Okay, let's see if we can switch back. Change your microphones again. Okay, back to it. First of all, I actually want you to try and ignore the answer that's been provided below. We'll have a look at that in a second, okay? And I'm just going to, in order to achieve that, I'm just going to sort of zoom us in a little bit. I want to look at the control of breathing. Now, first of all, guys, I want us to recognize something. We have got, in this little part of the brain just here, we have got this medulla, okay? And now I don't know why I'm pronouncing it like that, but that medulla within it has numerous control systems, and one of them is the respiratory control center. And I want you to be aware that the respiratory control center has two features to it. It has an inspiratory control and it has an expiratory control. One that you would think controls inspiration breathing in, and one that controls expiration breathing out, you would think. Well, it's not quite as simple as that, and I just want to sort of explain that concept to you. First of all, I'm going to make a connection between, if I do it like this, from, obviously this will be down through the spinal cord, so don't take this too literally. So from here, I'm going to make a connection, and my connection is going to come down to the diaphragm, just there, I'm not the best colour, and it's also going to come down to the muscles between the ribs. So what we've got there is the diaphragm and the external intercostal muscles, okay? So we've got that kind of connection made. And of course, what happens is that we're capable of doing sympathetic stimulation. Now, sympathetic stimulation of that means that we're going to cause those muscles to contract, or when we're exercising, contract harder, okay? We're going to get sympathetic control, okay? And what's going to happen here is that we're going to stimulate the diaphragm to contract and to broaden the thoracic cavity, and the intercostals to lift and to make the thoracic cavity bigger, and air will, of course, rush in that situation. And that is happening at rest. Okay, that is happening again. Now, in order to breathe out, all that's happening there is that signal is stopped and we relax. It's passive, we breathe out. So I want to be clear here. When we're at rest, inhalation, inhale, I'll just put inhale, and exhale are controlled by what? The ICC. Notice this ain't doing out or nout. It ain't doing out, it is doing now. Okay, it's doing nothing. So we've got the expiratory control center completely passive at this situation. We've got the contraction of the diaphragm and intercostals to cause breathing in, and then the relaxation, you see this muscle is now relaxed here to cause breathing out. Fantastic. Now, what happens if I start exercising, or you start exercising? Well, of course, what's going to happen is we've got a bunch of receptor systems. Let's say, for example, we have got your chemoreceptors, which, by the way, are positioned in both the brain and in the aorta. And what they're going to do is, during exercise, they're going to detect an increase in acidity, which we can also describe as a decrease in pH level. Of course, lower pH is acidic. So what's going to happen there is that information is going to go to the inspiratory control center. Meanwhile, our baroreceptors, let me choose a different darker color. That's not much darker. Our baroreceptors, they are detecting an increase in blood pressure. Okay, because we have now got the blood being squeezed back to the heart, faster venous return, and it's being pumped out at greater force, increased stroke volume, greater blood pressure. The baroreceptors are going to do it, and they're going to inform, guess what? The inspiratory control center. Now, we've got our final mechanoreceptors. Actually, there are other receptors as well, but I'm going to call these mechanoreceptors or proprioceptors. Mechanoreceptors. I'm not sure I've spelled that right. So things like our muscle spindles, things like our GTOs. If you're not sure what those are, don't worry about those too much. These are detector cells within muscles and tendons. And what they can do again is they can inform the inspiratory control center, well, we have got exercise taking place. And what happens is that our diaphragm, so what we get is sympathetic stimulation, and effectively this signal gets stronger and these muscles contract harder. If we get an even further increase, we have got additional muscles that can join in. We have got muscles like the SCM, the sternocleidomastoid. We've got muscles like the pec minor, that will lift the ribs more. We have got muscles like the scalenes. That's a pair of muscles, by the way, the scalenes. And we will get now a more powerful contraction, a greater lifting. But notice, at no point yet have I talked about breathing frequency, F. I've only talked about depth. And that is when we get to higher intensities of exercise, guys. Our lung is actually called the Herring-Brewer reflex. I'm not going to get too much into the technicalities, but once the lungs start to inflate to a certain degree, the ICC goes, oi mate, ECC, do a bit, will ya? And what the ECC will then do is it will stimulate some muscles. So we've now got the ECC stimulating your six-pack. There's your abs down there. So we've now got your rectus abdominis. I always struggle to spell that. Rex abdominis. This is now contracting. What is it doing? Pulling the ribs down. And we've also got the internal intercostal muscles. There's another set of intercostals that pull the ribs downwards. And these muscles now fire in order to cause you to breathe out. But specifically, listen to this word, to breathe out quicker. The way we increase breathing frequency is to use these muscles to breathe out faster. All of the depth is controlled by the ICC. All of the rate is controlled by the ECC. So the job of the ECC is to control rate. Now, obviously, when we go into recovery, what's going to happen? Well, blood acidity is going to start to drop. Muscle pH is going to go back up. We're going to have less blood pressure. We're going to have less activity in the muscle spindles and GTOs. So now what do we get? We now get the opposite. We get parasympathetic control, and that of course is going to start decreasing everything which I have just described. So hopefully that's useful for you, and I just want to have a look at this answer. Now let's read it out. Explain how breathing is controlled during exercise. So nothing for rest here. We're looking at exercise. Breathing rate is controlled through the neural and chemical control. Chemoreceptors detect a change in partial pressure of gases and send a signal to the medulla oblongata. So first of all, guys, I'm highlighting this and I am going to say no, that is too vague. Why? Why is that? Because chemoreceptors, to get that mark, guys, we should be saying an increase in acidity. Now, our student has written here partial pressure. Now, there's some truth to that, but the fact they put pressure in there worries me. They seem to be confusing baroreceptors. We want to say chemoreceptors detect an increase in acidity. Message then relayed to the respiratory muscles and the diaphragm and intercostal muscles to contract with more force. I'm happy with that. There's a mark. Allowing more oxygen to enter the lungs and more CO2 to be removed. So I'm giving 1 out of 4. So I'm saying this answer is not good enough quality. What would we want? We'd want the chemoreceptors detecting increased acidity. We'd want increased pressure by the baroreceptors. We could go into mechanoreceptors as well. And what we should be saying is this equals an increased depth sympathetically. Okay, so that answer ain't great, folks. Okay, sympathetically, that we get greater depth. And then what we're going to say is that at max exercise, we get the ECC kicking in to stimulate the rectus abdominis and internal intercostals to increase the rate of breathing. Now, what's interesting about this is asking about breathing rate. So technically speaking, only that bit asks that question, but unfortunately exam boards have got a real tendency just to mix up breathing rate and depth as the same thing. They are not, but hopefully that's going to give you some clarity on that one. Okay, I've got to change canvases. I'll be straight back. I'm being told we're a bit short of time, and I'm a bit disappointed because I was really looking forward to this section of this particular session because I really enjoy the topic of asthma, not in that way. And I wanted to talk to you all about histamine and what have you, and about the detection. But let me just give you the basic premise of this. When an asthma attack happens, bronchioles constrict. These are bronchioles, by the way. These are bronchioles, which I'm sure you loosely know what they are. And what happens is during an asthma attack, bronchioles will release in the muscle wall. Histamine will be released. That's these little red dots. And what the impact of histamine is to cause vasoconstriction of this smooth muscle, and it will cause effectively this space, which we call the lumen, to be smaller. Now, I'm not going to get into all of the detection systems that sort of here. The other thing you might notice is this sort of yellowy stuff here, which is the mucus. We also produce more of that. That's an attempt to almost cleanse the air. Okay, so that happens as well. But what we'll focus on for today, just because time's short, we'll focus on cause and trigger. So first of all, in terms of causes, we need to think about the environmental causes. Okay, and with this, we are talking about things like pollution. If you live in a city with smog, for example, you're going to be more likely to experience asthma. If you live around smoke, you're going to be more likely. If you live with animals that perhaps shed their hair, I mean, you don't breathe in the animals themselves unless they're really little, but the animal hair, if animals around you shed hair, that can be an irritant to bronchioles. And certain chemicals, and this can include sort of household chemicals. So I know lots of people these days are very interested in more natural sort of cleaning products, bicarbonates and vinegars and things like that. Now, we've also got something called EIA, and it's called exercise-induced asthma. Now, there's a whole ream of study on this, by the way. So I'm very much summarising, but can I stress to you that EIA is thought to have two primary triggers. The first one is cold air especially, and the second one is high intensity exercise. So it really stresses the importance of warming up, for example. That helps asthmatics a lot to prevent things like asthma attacks. Now, what are the symptoms of asthma? Well, you get quite a lot of coughing. You will also get, this is a nice verb for you to use, you will also get wheezing. Now, you can even go as far as say whistling of the chest. Now, I remember this really well. My elder daughter, Anna, she had really, really severe asthma when she was a little girl. And I remember once I honestly thought, it's not funny, I thought she was going to die. And she ended up in hospital a week. And the noise coming out of her chest, it was a literal whistle. It was remarkable. Anyway, what we get is we get the constriction of airways, as we've just said above. That's what's going to happen there. And what does this cause? Well, it causes our breathing frequency to jump. We start to breathe fast to get more air in, because our tidal volume has gone down, as we've just talked about. As a result of this, we get less air into the lungs. Therefore, we get less diffusion occurring. So all of a sudden, what have we got? We have got less HbO2. If you're not sure what that is oxyhemoglobin. The saturation of the blood with oxygen goes down. Now, if we go, I remember that time with my daughter, we got to hospital and her HbO2 level was at 73%. And I was told later that is shortly before death. Well, again, not funny, but people generally are above 97% of HbO2 saturation, okay? So this would be a really, you'd only ever see, like, if people go to altitude, go up to base camp of Everest, things like that, this would be really extreme. So again, anyway, I don't mean to make it too much about me and my daughter, but just a bit of personal experience there. Now, we also want to think about altitude and its effects. Of course, this is another factor we can think about. Now, can I just stress to you, when we're talking about altitude, we are talking about, for this course, over 3,000 meters. Other courses teach it at 2,400 meters. But anyway, and what an athlete will do is they will go to altitude 4 to 5 weeks before their big competition events, Olympics, whatever it happens to be. And that's because, of course, the effects are temporary. What happens? We get, or the positive effects is we get a release of more EPO, erythropoietin. This is the hormone that stimulates red blood cell production. Therefore, we get up arrow, more red blood cells. Fantastic. We also, therefore, get more oxygen carriage. We're able to actually carry more oxygen in the blood. Therefore, we get an up arrow, a steeper oxygen concentration of the blood. Okay, so more oxygen in the blood, as we mentioned already. It means that when we're exercising, we can perform recovery faster. Remember, your recovery system is your aerobic system. All of this means that we get to do more aerobic work, and of course I could say here higher intensity aerobically. It means that we get more myoglobin. Myoglobin is the product in the muscle cell which allows oxygen to be stored and carried. We also grow more and larger mitochondria. Mitochondria are the sites of aerobic respiration. And we also get more fat oxidation. This is actually called beta oxidation, but I'll just call it fat oxidation here. We're able to oxidize fats actually at higher intensities, which is great. It means we're more efficient when we perform. Now, there are problems. What are the negative long-term effects? Well, someone might, by the way, I've just realised something. I've just realised what I've done here. All of that should be in there, folks. Okay? I thought I was doing the positives, and it's not. It's what happens immediately. What I've just written about is the long-term effects. So these are the long-term effects. What I'm writing about now is what happens when you get there. Okay, so a couple of problems. You might experience hypoxia, that's altitude sickness. What will also happen is that your performance will drop initially. So of course that's a bit of a concern. You will experience early fatigue. I can't believe I messed that up. Early fatigue. Also, you might have poor training quality. You know, the fact that you're at altitude when you first get there might mean that your training quality drops, and overall you're going to have lower levels of HbO2, lower levels of oxygen in the blood. Sorry for that mess up, guys. All of that material should have been over here, and this material here should have been here. Apologies, I screwed that right up. Okay, what's this question? Evaluate the effects of training at altitude on the respiratory system of an athlete training for a marathon, a 10,000 meter run, a triathlon, or a long distance cyclist. Now, what I'm going to do here, guys, is I'm going to take what I wrote in green up here, and that is my answer. Okay, I'm saying they're all the positives, but hang on a minute, there is a problem. When I evaluate, I've got to put negatives in as well. So I'm going to give you a couple of evaluative statements, and then we'll move on. So I'm going to say a benefit, let me go for a triathlete, for a triathlete is that they produce more EPO and therefore, comma, more red blood cells. Now, obviously, what I'm going to do there is I'm going to go on to talk about oxygen carriage, etc., etc. But I want to now look at the other side. We've got the benefit. What's the drawback? However, when they first get there, when they first arrive, training quality reduces. Now, I'm not going to go any further with this just on the basis of time, but can you see clearly that I am performing an evaluative structure? Why? Because I'm giving the benefit, I am then following up with the negative, the drawback, the however, the weakness. And you need to do that again and again and again using that information that we've got above. Now, a lot of it will be about the fact that, you know, once you're there and you've trained a bit, you get all of those benefits. But when you first get there, it's a bit of a problem. The other thing that you could have as a negative in there, guys, is notice that this is temporary. The effects don't last. You can't, unless you're living at altitude, those effects don't last. They only last for a couple of weeks once you've come back down to altitude in that way. Now then, let's get into responses of the CV system here. Okay, let's get into the responses of the CV system here. So we've got here again our descriptions and explanations, very much like we did before. I'm going to go to like an orange color. Anticipatory rise, increases in heart rate prior to exercise. That's that adrenaline released affects the SNO. Due to the release of adrenaline stimulates SNO to increase heart rate. Okay, fine. Now we've got increased heart rate. Why is this impacting? It's impacting because it goes on to increase Q, it's cardiac output. It goes on to increase oxygen delivery to the muscles. Okay, that is a really great impact for us. Fantastic. We've got one here. More blood can be delivered to working muscles, therefore more oxygen is taken up by the muscles and more carbon dioxide is removed. This leads to an increase in blood pressure. Now, what we're saying here is this is being caused by an increase in cardiac output. That thing I wrote there, increased Q, that's the same thing. Increased cardiac output, therefore more blood delivered. We get increased blood flow. What is the positive of this? Increased blood pressure. This increases flow of blood, therefore we'll be working more efficiently. And finally, guys, we've got here, blood is redirected towards skeletal muscle and away from other non-sexual organs. This happens through vasodilation of by the way, that should say arterioles, not arteries. Arterioles, by the way, are just little arteries, that's all it means. Working muscles which increase blood flow and vasoconstriction of arterioles again towards other organs which restricts blood flow. So what we're saying here is this is the effect of redistribution, that's an I, of Q, of cardiac output. By the way, that little dot on top of the Q, that just means per unit of time. Okay, let's keep going. What have we got here? Explain how blood flow is redirected in response to exercise. Let's mark this answer. We're looking for 4 marks. Let's see if we get them. Blood flow is redirected during exercise. By the way, can I just stress, this is something I don't like. I just wouldn't write that. Just don't bother. Just put vascular shunt in. Right, there's my answer. There's 1 mark. It's done by vascular shunt. I'll come back to that. Blood is shunted towards skeletal muscles and away from other organs. I agree with that. That's going to get us a mark. The process occurs through vasodilation of arterioles towards the working muscles. Agreed. And then we've got which increases blood flow. Agreed. The arterioles towards other organs in the body vasoconstrict. There's my answer, there's my max. Now, the only point I want to make is this specific language here about vascular shunting. Can I just stress something to you? If we've got an arteriole here and it's leading in to a capillary bed, okay, so here's the arteriole, blood coming up here, and here's the entrance to the capillary. What normally happens is blood will now split off into numerous other capillaries like this and split into this almost like fan shape to surround this whole tissue. But what happens during a vasoconstriction is muscles here, you get the idea, they constrict, and what that means is that the only blood to flow through flows through the central capillary, and that's what we mean by shunting. Central capillary receives blood at, let's say, the liver during exercise, because these other ones are closed off. These are closed off, so it goes back around the system, and eventually it's going to come back up into some of the capillary bed, perhaps at the muscle, and this time the capillary bed will be open. That's what we mean by shunting of blood. I just wanted to express that and make sure we had it clear. Okay, the ATP-PC system, folks, the A-lactacid system, fantastic. Let's have a look at this. One of my favourites. So let's have a look. We're obviously focused here. Let's be clear what we've got. It's a very high intensity system, anaerobic, up to 10 seconds. We get 50% recovery in 30 seconds, 100% in 2 to 3 minutes. I'll come back to that. How does this work? Well, let's first of all remind ourselves of how ATP is broken down. Remember, ATP is the biological currency. That was not meant to be like that. The biological currency of all energy. So every biological process is how the energy that's powering it is done by ATP. So it's a really important product and we need it for energy. How does that work? Well, ATP, in the presence of ATPase, our active enzyme in this breakdown, will release not adenosine triphosphate, T, but adenosine diphosphate, and it will release a phosphagen group and it will release energy. This energy is going to go and be used for movement. Let's say you're going to throw a javelin or something. That energy is going to go and be used for movement. But the problem is this is the only utilizable source of energy. We've got to use that for further movement of whatever it's going to be. Okay, so how do we get back to this? So this is what we do. In the sarcoplasm of the muscle, we've got phosphocreatine. In the presence of creatine kinase, if we're working at very high intensity, phosphocreatine will be split and it will release phosphagen and creatine and energy. Now, this energy is not in the form of ATP. We cannot use it for movement. So rather, we take our ADP, bring it down. We take our phosphagen, bring it down. We take our energy, bring it down. And then we combine the ADP with the phosphagen group with energy, and we resynthesize ATP to get us back to that point. And we've now got more energy for movement. And this is what we would call a coupled reaction, guys. A coupled reaction. Why? Because the products of this reaction are used as reactants in this reaction, therefore it's a coupled. We get the release of energy exothermically, then the taken in of energy endothermically, and that therefore makes it a coupled reaction. Let's just quickly analyze this system. What is the fuel source first of all? Well, we know the fuel source is CP, creatine phosphate. What is the controlling enzyme? We have got CK, creatine kinase. What's the energy yield? Well, for every CP we got 1 CP to 1 ATP, so it's 1 to 1. What are the byproducts? None. So smart, eagle-eyed people amongst you might notice that this is still knocking about, and this is still knocking about and not currently utilised. And of course, once we start recovering this system, which takes 30 seconds for 50%, 2 to 3 minutes for the whole thing, we stick these things back together and we've got back to our PC state again. So that's how we re-synthesize PC. So we end up with no byproducts. In terms of the type of reaction, this is an anaerobic reaction. There is not the presence of oxygen, but just remember that you've got your coupled reaction going on. What are the strengths and weaknesses of this particular system? Let's see if we can do that. Well, on the strength side, folks, on the strength side, we've got very high intensity energy. So it's really explosive, for want of another term. So really high intensity energy. We've got no fatiguing byproducts. I'll just put BP, no fatiguing byproducts, no lactic acid, for example. We've got all the it's not the products. We've got all the reactants. All the reactants are in the cell, are in the muscle cell. So there's this next point now applies. there is no, so there's that one, there's that one, there's that one. We've got no delay for O2 delivery. So when we need to use the system, it's there ready to go. But of course, there are weaknesses to the system. What are they? Well, first of all, it's short duration. We know that this can last only 10 seconds, not great. Secondly, we get a low energy yield, which is one of the reasons why it's short, by the way. We get a low energy yield, just 1-to-1. And this one's a really nice one. We get a slow relative recovery. Let me be clear what we mean by that. If you do 10 seconds of work with the PC system, it's going to take, for 10 seconds, it's going to take 3 minutes to recover that. So that is a really poor ratio. You know, even if you look at 50% recovery, you're looking at that in 30 seconds. So you're getting, for your recovery ratio is 1 to 3 plus. That is a poor ratio. So that is something that we just want to be aware of. Okay, I think I'm changing canvas. Let's see if we can finish this off really strongly in the aerobic system. So let's start here. This here, we have a fuel source of glycogen for aerobic energy release. And glycogen is broken down into glucose 6-phosphate. And by the way, one of the enzymes that is involved, this is called glucose phosphorylase, GPP, so I'm going to reference that here. Now, that process actually consumes 2 ATP. So at the moment, we're at -2, all right? Now, we take glucose and we effectively convert it into pyruvic acid. We do this in the presence of PFK, and this is called, sorry about the long word, guys, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's called phosphofructo, I'll go around the corner, kinase. That's all one word, believe it or not. Phosphofructokinase, nothing rude about that at all. Now, obviously, what we're going to say here is that breakdown is achieving 4 ATP for us, so we get a net gain, a total gain of 2 ATP, 4 minus 2, 2. Fine. Now, if we had insufficient oxygen, we would go in this direction over here. We would now convert pyruvate into lactic acid, and we would do that. Okay, so that can be done. However, what we're going to say is that we do have sufficient oxygen. So maybe we're working at a non-high intensity, maybe we're working longer duration, and pyruvic acid is going to be converted to acetyl coenzyme A, and it's going to be carried into something called the Krebs cycle for 2¼ turns. No detail required at this point. And what's going to happen in that process is we're going to have the release of 2 further ATP and CO2 as a byproduct. Now, I want to make a point here. We've looked at glycogen doing this. I just want you to notice that coming into this Krebs cycle can also be lipids. We could call these glycerol fatty acids. We could call it triglyceride. I'm not going to get into the technicalities. But this is broken down in the presence of lipase and enters the Krebs cycle. Okay, so we can do this with fats. Basically, it's how fats are oxidized. Now, if I take this a little bit further, the other output of the Krebs cycle is hydrogen ion. And those hydrogen ions are taken into the electron transport chain within the mitochondria. And in that process, we convert them into water. And in that process, we release 34 ATP, making for the lower half of this a net gain of 36. For the upper half, 32. That gives us a ratio of 1 to 38 ATP. Now, can I stress to you, that is in optimal conditions. It's often less than 38, but that's in optimal conditions. In fact, it often is when it would be more when fats are being oxidized. Now, what are the strengths of this system in terms of our... In fact, let me do the analysis first. Let's go into here and let's go for this color and let's go for analysis. What's the fuel source? Well, it's glycogen. You can also say fats if you want to, lipids. What's the controlling enzyme? Well, we know it's PFK. You can also say lipase if you want to. What's the yield? Well, it's up to 1 to 38, often less. What's the byproducts? We've got CO2 and water, which of course are breathed out, or in the case of water, sweated out if necessary. And what type of reaction is this? Well, this is an aerobic reaction. It's in the presence of sufficient oxygen. Now, there are strengths and weaknesses to this system, as there are every system. What are the strengths, folks? What would we say we like about this? Well, first of all, it's a long duration system. It can go for 2 hours without any further refueling on average. And if we take on food, we can actually go for longer than that. We also get a high yield. We could say, for example, there's an efficient system. And we've also got no fatiguing BP. Now, you might be saying, hang on a minute, James, we've got CO2 and water. Doesn't the CO2 make the blood more acidic? Well, it does. And actually, one of the impacts of more acidic blood, guys, is that at lower levels, when it's not a dramatic change, we actually get more oxygen delivered into the cell. It's called the Bohr shift. I'm not going to teach it here, but it's a really interesting so the slightly more acidic, good, that's what CO2 can do. When we get into really more acidic, lactic acid, hydrogen ions, that's where things can get a little bit away from us. Now, this system has some weaknesses as well, of course. So one of the ones I want to say here is that it's moderate intensity or low intensity, and this word really matters, only. We have to say that only it gets to that level. It can't release high intensity energy. And the other point, I'm sure you've picked this one up, we've got a delay for O2 delivery. Now, we've actually got a name for that delay. It's called oxygen deficit. I'm not going to get into it now, but if you want interested in studying that further, some really nice area of study. Now, we've got a little bit of a summary here just about which energy systems are predominant in which different activity. Let me just scan. Let's just take a couple of examples before we finish this off. So what we're saying is a javelin throw. It's a very high intensity. This is more energy continuum, really. It's a short duration, probably takes 7 seconds. Therefore, it's anaerobic, specifically PC system. 1500 meter running. It's moderate intensity, probably with the exception of sprint starts and finishes. It's long, in the region of 5 minutes, not when I do it. It's much longer than that. It's the aerobic system, agreed. Basketball full court defense is quite high intensity, but not very high. It's probably in the region of 3 minutes. It's anaerobic, and it is specifically predominantly the lactic acid system here. And open water swimming, moderate low intensity, up to 2 hours. It is an aerobic predominant sport. Now, let's finish this off, guys. Last thing from me today. Whoops. We've got here, evaluate. We are interested in evaluate. Remember, we want strengths, we want weaknesses, we want conclusion. Okay, so let's see what we've got here as evaluation. The aerobic system is used for low intensity work. Agreed. Usually between 3 minutes and 2 hours. Agreed. However, the long jump is an event that is short duration. That's great. So we're saying it's not good, and involves high intensity. That's not good. Explosive movements. As a result, the aerobic system cannot power the intense movements. We like that, so that's a weakness, mainly by endurance athletes. Although the aerobic system is not used for executing a jump, it could be argued that the aerobic system is used during recovery. Well, it is. So that's a nice use between jumps and through the duration of the whole competition. Good. A long jumper would most likely prioritize training their lactate system and ATP-PC system. We agree. And by the way, this bit at the end from here, that's where the conclusion comes in, over the training of their aerobic system. So basically we're saying this ain't that great. So what we said is there's loads of weaknesses. We had 3 or 4 weaknesses in there. We said one strength is that it's good for recovery. Another strength we said for the whole competition. And then we got our conclusion, which is basically this athlete should be using more lactate and phosphagen systems. So there's our kind of answer to that one. Now, can I stress down here, you can go about doing that question for any of those systems, for any performance. And it's a great skill, because if you're asked to analyze, you're doing fuel source, you're doing type of reaction, you're doing site of reaction, you're doing yield, etc., etc. Evaluate strengths and weaknesses. Choose the system you want, and then each time choose a different type of performance. And of course, you can come up with a whole range of examples of answers that would be either evaluative or analytical in their nature. This one, of course, was more evaluative, conclusion on the end. Okay, I think that's it. Whew, there we go. Another day, another session. There's only one session today. I'm doing 2 sessions a day on most of the days. So quite a calm session today. I've actually got a rest after this. So yeah, good. Any questions or observations, Martha?
Yes, we have a request. If you can very quickly go through the lactic acid system.
Yeah, I didn't do it as one of the topics in the session. Touched it just at the end there. So super, I don't have a slide for it or anything like that prepared, but super quickly off the top of my head. So fuel source, glycogen. Glycogen is anaerobically glycolysized or lysized, we can say goes through anaerobic glycolysis in the presence of, amongst other enzymes, glucose phosphorylase, GPP. It's broken down into glucose 6-phosphate. That process consumes 2 ATP. That glucose is then converted into pyruvic acid. That releases 4 ATP, net gain of 2. As a result of there being insufficient oxygen available to process that pyruvic acid, it's converted to lactic acid in the presence of lactate dehydrogenase, LDH, and then ultimately that lactic acid is then processed. And the way it's processed, we don't really do it in this course, but the lactate is reused. It breaks into lactate and hydrogen ion. The lactate is reused mostly for energy, and the hydrogen ion is what we call mopped up, and we use a bicarbonate ion to convert it ultimately into CO2 and water we breathe out. The hydrogen ion is the fatiguing bit. Now, in terms of the analysis, so site of reaction sarcoplasm, fuel source glycogen, controlling enzyme I didn't mention, but PFK, that's the glucose into pyruvic acid. The energy yield is 1 glycogen to 2 ATP. What am I forgetting? Byproducts, lactic acid, and it is fatigue. And then evaluation advantages are high intensity, not very high, but high intensity, no delay for oxygen delivery, all reactants in the cell ready to go. What am I forgetting? Then in terms of weaknesses, of course, it's short duration, longer than the phosphagen system, PC system, but short duration. Lactic acid is fatiguing, as we've already mentioned. And thirdly, what was I going to say? Low energy yield. Okay, so off the top of my head, I might have missed something, but that would be the description of that system, and especially the way to analyse that. Obviously, what we find classic examples of lactic acid system performance, I always use the same ones. I say something like a 400-metre hurdle race is a really good example. I really like the idea of a basketball full court press. I think that's a really good one. I think those of you that enjoy your football these days, you can probably talk about a high press in football or periods of high press. It's quite a nice one. Talk about lactic acid system. 200-metre swim, that sort of thing would be a classic case of a lactic acid system. So yeah, that would be my guidance on that. Yeah, I didn't include it as one of the topics, but yeah, it's good system.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
It's obviously also the start of the aerobic system, of course, as well, but this time done anaerobically. But anyway, yeah.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Great.
Any other questions?
We haven't got any other questions. We have a shout out to Worthing College.
Again?
Yes, Mr. Hallday.
I know, well, I got told off the other day.
Watching the session with his BTEC group.
Oh, cheers. Well, thank you, Dave. Thank you for giving a shout. Dave's a really nice guy. I've chatted to him plenty of times, and really nice fellow. Hello, BTEC students. I mean, it always baffles me why anyone wants me to say hello to them. But
yes, they've got they've posted a few pictures.
Oh,
and they've got another impressive array of Harry.
Have they?
Books.
Hang on,
Yes.
I haven't seen this because what's that on Twitter? Is it?
Yes.
Shall I try and get it on the screen? I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it. Let me see if I can add a shot. 'Cause I didn't have add a shot. Oh yeah, here it goes. Screen capture. That's a shot. Screen capture. There we go. Hang on. This is going to work. I think this is going to show. Let me just add a source to this. Now, guys, you're going to see a little bit about how we do the show here. So when I switch this, you're going to see all of like our control systems and things. But if I go over to here. Is it behind? It's there they go. What a bunch of legends. Here we go. What we got here? Oh, bless them. That is so lovely. Oh, look, they've even got the roadmap look on the. They've even got the roadmap look on the wall. Oh, yeah, you're so sweet. Thank you. I see the infographics there as well in the picture. I mean, that is a top Haribo selection. Yeah. Of course, Marta. What are we going to go past this summer? Do you remember we are going to be very, very, very near to the Haribo factory, Marta and I, where we're going on holiday this summer.
Well, at least the factory in Spain.
The factory in Spain, yeah. So where is it again? I'm going to say it's in
near Girona.
Near Girona. It's near. I want to say near Biladaresh, Besalú.
No, as high as
Biladaresh.
Yeah, it's on the way to the airport, isn't it?
So I'll pick you some up, guys. We'll get in the Haribo. It's like an outlet as well. Like they've got the factory and a big outlet, so I'll get in there. It's like going through what's it called, duty free, just jelly. So we'll I'll see if we can sort something out and get something on for next year and get that back. But yeah, any other questions or comments or shout? No. Thank you for that, Dave. Really appreciate it. You guys are great down with it.
No more questions.
Brilliant. Okay, well look, Thursday, what's on telly tonight? Ooh, a bit of Aston Villa Olympique Lyonnais. I'm definitely watching that. I'm a big fan of the Villa team, so I'm gonna definitely watch that later on. And what else are we doing, Marta? We have got anything nice for dinner? Chicken for dinner.
Chicken needs eating. Yeah.
Chicken. All right, guys. Really appreciate your attendance. Best of luck with the BTEC level 3 unit 1 exam. We really hope it goes well. If this has been valuable or otherwise, let us know. We do want to sort of build on this going forward. And those of you that are with us for GCSE sessions, A-level sessions, they continue next week. And thank you very much for being part of it. We appreciate it. Here we go. I will play you out with a little bit of music. Here we go.